Just can't wait to see wood on the ground.
Thank you, Peter.
Steps, brother.
Good morning, all, and thank you for being here. We're going to start the Glens Falls Industrial Development Agency meeting. This is a special meeting that we call for a project that has a tight timeline, and we do have a quorum. So we're missing two of our board members. Mayor Collins is not with us, and Tim Larson is not with us, and if Tim arrives, then we'll bring him into the conversation. But otherwise, we have a quorum, and we're joined by Jeff from City Hall, who's our CEO, and Kara Leas, our attorney. So thank you all for being here today and for coming in for this special meeting. So we are not going to do any kind of project reports from other projects. We're also not going to do any meeting minutes today from other minutes or other meetings, and we're not going to do any kind of financial reports today. So we'll move all of those things to our May meeting. So the purpose of today's meeting is really to talk about 4656 South Street. The applicant is Chris Patton, and he is here with us today with his counsel. We have an application from Chris that was just recently updated, and everyone here has received a copy. Just want to make sure. Okay. Yep. So we can do questions with Chris and his attorney shortly, but why don't we ask him to make a short presentation first about the project. Jeff, do you want to add
anything?
Yeah,
I just was going to interject real quickly. The reason for this, the time frame here, Chris and I had talked about this project, some time ago as he was sort of negotiating. As you guys know, the project we're talking about at South Street is the last major building on South Street, and we've been involved. The LDC and IDA boards have been involved in the development projects down there, obviously the DRI. This is the last piece, along with the sort of loosely partnered piece that at the end of the block. I used to say the Rite Aid building, but it's not there anymore, so I guess we'll have to call it now something else until that's built.
Did someone tear that down?
Yeah, I don't know. And I think it took, it took someone with some creativity, I think, to sort of figure out a way to accommodate the parking, which you don't have at this building we're talking about. So we've been discussing this. Chris has sort of taken on the task. But I think as he'll identify here for us a little bit, this is a monumental project in the sense that this building has been, probably as neglected as any building in the city. It's obvious it's a conversion. It was never any kind of residential or strict commercial. I know there were commercial properties down at the bottom, but it was a former industrial building. Lots of weather damage, lots of neglect, with the exception of the buildings across the street. Probably nothing can compare as far as, tough shape. So he had stopped in a couple weeks ago, and, when we were looking at ways that the city might be able to help, obviously the IDA is a logical one. So I asked him to come in and talk a little bit about some of the challenges he's had, and then of course we can talk about the application itself.
Well, let's start with the application itself, and then we can get into some of those, because we'll have some questions related to that.
For sure.
So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, 4656 South is, it's been 25 years that I've been looking at the back windows, and it just, the dire need for the restoration of that building. I think we can all agree, and it's a staple, it's a cornerstone of the Glens Falls downtown. So, well deserving of any type of restoration. And as I'm going throughout this project and just looking at, everything that we expose and making decisions on a daily basis, whether or not we're going to go to that century worth of restoration, something that's going to be long lasting, or something that we can just put dust under the rug. I brought a few pictures in today just to show some of the decisions that we've made.
We're just the same package.
Really this building, we all know we had a couple engineers that said it was going to collapse.
We did too.
Yeah, we had one is my good friend who, he warned me, and so I said, I think we can do this. And I spent probably several months going in trying to establish what exactly we were going to have to do. But we all know there's no way you can, without ripping ceilings down and pulling up floors, we can't really decide or tell exactly what it is that we're going to be, undertaking. So really just stopping the building from falling was our biggest undertaking, and that was done with my framer Scott and myself. We literally, most buildings start from the roof down, right? But this one, we had nothing to actually support to even lift the roof. We had to actually start in the basement to rebuild structural things to allow us to even support the roof system. So we really had to work from bottom up and then from top down to shore things to hold up the walls. And then, again, work from bottom up and top. It's way more work than I
One quick question,
anticipated.
Chris, what am I looking at here? In this roof, it looks like the whole thing sagged in.
Yeah, so that's actually how the original framing was done, that allowed all the water to run to a drain location. So what I showed here is that we've actually gone over top of the existing roof, which we thought we were able to just go over top of it with like a rubber membrane. But again, this decision was, another decision that was basically a way to make sure that this roof system lasts forever. Zip system, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with the product. It's 100% watertight. It is not cheap by any means, but again, this downtown building, it's worthy of a century worth of preservation. So it's like, these are the decisions that I made to make sure that it's gonna last forever. And going over top of the zip wall system, re-supporting, or going over top of the existing roofing rather, and re-supporting it from up underneath. This was just a decision I made just because you didn't even, this is actually watertight. So right now the building sits with just this membrane, and it's actually watertight. So we'll have like a double or triple layer roof system when we're done. And that's why I showed this picture, because
Are your services gonna be up here? Your HVAC and all that are gonna be?
No, how the
okay.
building actually
Yeah.
steps down to that small building in
Yeah.
the back, we're actually going to support, we're actually reframing on the back side of that wall, and then we're going to be suspending all of the HVAC systems on the back, so you won't see any of it.
Right, and you won't need to,
And we will have
permeate
nothing,
that.
we'll
Yeah,
have
okay,
nothing on
right.
the roof.
Yeah,
It's a brick,
beautiful.
we're actually using a brand new roof system. It's like a white TPO membrane. It's actually like a tape membrane. It's a 50-year product. So that actually starts this weekend.
Are you
Okay.
putting in like mini splits or heat pumps, or how's
Yep.
that what you're gonna put in?
Mini splits, heat pumps, and then some HVAC systems for the restaurant, but, and then, they'll all be located on that secondary roof on that
On
wall.
the back, yeah, nice,
Yeah, so you
nice,
won't be
nice,
able to see
nice.
it.
Chris, have you been able to determine what's caused some of these things? Is this just
Neglect.
poor maintenance? Is
I
there,
mean, I would say,
did the prior owner not really care for the building?
Right,
Was the
correct.
prior owner not?
without
doing any
speaking
work?
poorly of the other owners, right? I mean, I
He's
would
my
say,
landlord, the other owner. Okay, let's,
All right, I'm
enough
sorry.
said, right.
yeah, I would say, neglect ultimately over the last 20 years from not repairing the roof leaks caused major structural failures. But prior to that, as we peel back layers from the floor, as we peel back layers from the ceiling, we found that over the years, and I'd say over the last 100 years, everybody that's done a renovation or maybe added a new commercial space, they really didn't give the building the attention, or really care to, let's say, check to see if a triple 2x6 stud was actually supporting and carrying load from the roof system. We found doorways that were cut open that they just went right through the 2x6s, and they're actually a point load that goes from the basement all the way up to the roof. So that caused several little boards, or beams rather, to sag and dip. And these are the things that we found that after the project, once we got into it, tore the tin off the walls. So I'd say it's a mix of some neglect over the last 20 years with the roof leaks not being repaired, but also, like I said, the restorations and renovations and adding the different commercial spaces, and it was New Way Lunch, it was something else, but they really didn't take the time to get to the subfloor, as Hank would appreciate me saying, get down to the nitty gritty and make sure that, replace the rotten wood. Don't just, where you have a sag, don't just pour floor leveler product over top of it and then laminate it with, some carpet and call it flat.
Have you had an environmental review done of the property?
Yeah, there's
I
been.
know you've got an architect, so your architect has been in there and helped you with design, but
Mhm.
have you also looked at environmental issues?
From an environmental standpoint, I'd say all of the environmental issues were rectified before I was there. So no hazardous materials on site, which was nice. There was like, there was an old boiler, a few things like that. I mean, but a lot of like the pipe wrap and all that stuff had been taken away before I got through.
Well,
Yeah, which was nice. And with the old shirt factories, a lot of it, they ran like just a solid boiler piping up to radiators that it was exposed.
yeah.
Like
So
even
the
in like
heat
the
generator,
school-
right? Yeah.
like even in schools, you remember like the
Yep.
boiler pipes, before they put all the pipe wrapping on there, a lot of it was just exposed. The same was present in the 274 Glen Street. Hardly any of that kind of environmental
Yeah.
stuff. So
That's good.
yeah. Will I say there's no dusty, hazardous material? Oh no, it's been 3 or 4 months every day. You see my vehicle there.
So talk
It's
to
rough.
us about your financing.
Mhm.
You've got, do you have an agreement with a bank? Has that been signed?
Yes, I have
Or is it a
lined up
letter of intent, or is it a fully executed agreement?
fully executed commitment. Yep.
Okay.
Yes, so we
Have
are,
you started to draw on it?
no.
Okay.
So we are in the stage of appraisals, and I believe the appraisal should be done by the end of the week, this week. I just talked to the appraisal company yesterday. So I would anticipate closing on the initial, on the loan, probably within 3 weeks or so.
Well, actually, once we get this set,
Right,
Oh, is
and
it?
this is
Yeah.
probably a fundamental piece of that.
yeah.
Yes. That's right.
So when you get those appraisals, we'll want copies of them too.
Well,
So
Gotcha.
for our records, yes.
Okay.
Are the appraisals going to influence your funding? Is that,
No,
but
they-
they've already committed
that's
to funding
what
it
appraisal.
regardless of what the
It's
appraisal
contingent
is at?
upon the appraisal.
appraisal.
Okay, so,
Right.
it's-
Appraisal.
okay, so your funding could be shortfall if the appraisals are lower?
Correct.
Okay,
And that's actually
Which
another
is why
reason
they've
why.
done so much work ahead of time.
okay.
Right.
Right.
And that's the other reason why, with the pilot program, that really affects the appraisal. And I didn't, this is,
Absolutely.
this is my first pilot program application, so I apologize for not understanding all this completely. But yeah, I was surprised at how much the appraiser wants to know whether or not the pilot program is going to be weighed into effect. Ultimately, I guess it, decides the value a little bit. I don't know.
For the
So-
bank, it does.
Right, for the bank,
Absolutely.
exactly, for
More
how
secure.
the building performs, so.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, yep.
Well, a
The
lot of,
expectations of it being able to generate profit over cost.
Hey, this is my mom.
Yes,
Hey,
yes,
Regina.
right, right.
who's involved in a lot of the
Good morning.
preparation of the application too, so knows
Yeah.
a lot of these things,
Yeah.
we've gone back and forth quite a bit. One of the other things too about this is that, this building in particular, on all of South Street really, is the biggest suite of commercial spaces, right? We look at when you go down and look at South Street, all the way from the monument to the end of the block, right? And you look and see what's gonna be developed and what we will end up with. Like, there's, what, 5? I think you've got 5
5
small
plus a
retail
restaurant.
spaces plus a
6.
restaurant there, right? So, I think this is really where it's sort of a linchpin as far as the development of South Street and a lot of the foot traffic that I hear from all the restaurants down just beyond them, was saying, we need more foot traffic. And of course, they've been bemoaning the construction, although I think they understand the nature of that. You don't have much to work with other than the footprint of the building.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like you have a big lot. I know you do down the street, but you're gonna be building there. So, even Minaccio, for instance, has been able to use for a lot of their staging. They still had to close up the road. But they were doing a lot of their staging, have been in the South Street lot. But I think that commercial piece is an important
I
component,
agree.
and perhaps
Well, for
the
us,
reason-
that's the component,
Yeah.
obviously.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I think we all know. That's just been like an eyesore for everyone. That and the Rite Aid building. That again, everybody hoped that we had a new Walgreens come in and make it another beautiful property, but it just didn't happen. And Mr. Shabbat sitting on it, it just doesn't really, it didn't turn around. So it's all good.
Well, I think it was creative. When we talked about this right when you did it, I thought it was a great idea and still do. That, the idea of using the the first ground floor of that building to provide parking that'll not only support that building, but also this one. I know we had talked about, and I don't know if it was with you or another potential developer, when we were talking about the parking for this particular building. And we were thinking maybe there's a way that the Glen Street garage, that the city has some control of some spaces. And I said, well, that's in the CCD, you don't have to worry about parking. And whoever it was said, well, I have to worry about parking. I don't care whether you say I have to worry about parking.
It was me,
I need
yeah.
parking. If you're gonna put residential tenants there, they need somewhere to park. So, the idea of being able to find a creative solution to that doesn't, require some enormous lift or variances or whatever. And it's close by, and so you've got the value there.
Yeah, we've designed around we put the entrance to the apartments at the, furthest, call it the west side door, and that'll be the closest to the parking at Broad Street, so it'll be a quick, easy walk down the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back to the financing, the lender you're working with is?
Adirondack Trust and Capital
Adirondack
Bank are partnering together to provide lending for both this building and the building at Rite Aid,
Okay.
which will be called the Point.
Is there a separate agreement just for this building?
I think they're individual.
It's interesting, the two loans, both properties are securing both loans. One is the first, one is the second, and alternating on the other.
Okay,
But yes, they're individual loans on each
okay.
of them.
And you've got a letter of intent from them?
Commitment
Yeah,
letter.
commitment letters.
letter?
Yeah.
And does that explain how the construction financing will work? So we have a better understanding of how much of this money will go into construction as
Yeah.
part of that? Okay.
It's part of our submission, the budget
It
numbers.
is.
Yeah, the budget numbers really are the same budget numbers we've provided to
I
you.
understand your submission, but
Yeah.
I don't think we have a copy of your letter of intent from the bank.
I can certainly get
Yeah,
that.
get that to
Yeah,
Jeff, so
we'll get
it's
it.
in the file. Okay.
Yep. So, kind of,
Thanks, Scott.
And we did get a copy of the deed that reflected the purchase, which
Sure.
is post-planning board.
Right, yeah, and I just want, for the record, I just want to state that as part of the application, it reported the planning board activities, and in that, it reported that Chad Nims was still the owner of the property, and subsequent to that, Chris has submitted evidence that he does now own the property. And so that record is, we've updated our record so that it reflects that.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and just like, I guess, some project shortfalls, the reason for to be here, and the reason that we're asking for relief on the pilot program, obviously, I think we all think it's worthy, but, just finding things throughout the project that have really affected the ultimate budget, right? So we started with a budget in the beginning. It's tough to get the horse ahead of the cart on a project this size. You're going through trying to build a budget with buried walls and buried floors. We started. You can see like the next picture here in the back of the building. This shows how far we've had to go. This one here, I think it's
Yep.
two. The original intent was to just sheet over top of these floors that were here. And once we got into it, we found that the floors were not only bellied one way, they were bellied another way. And there was just no way that we could ever have, a brand new apartment with, tubs and showers and things, on top of a floor like this. So, again, I made the decision to go ahead and tear out every inch of these floors. So they're all going to be rebuilt, brand new construction, single layer, 3/4 plywood. And you can see that's on several levels throughout. The same goes on the back. If you go to the next photo, you can see a block wall that we had to build here. This was, I just wanted to show you. So I'm going to skip around a little bit, but we took down a block wall that was here. This is the divider wall that separates the Golden Monkey, the back alley behind the Golden Monkey bar. Once we got through there on the other side, we found that the Time Warner or Spectrum or somebody, the cable company, had actually, with a chipping hammer, removed a section of brick. See
That's
the
what I
little
was,
triangle?
yeah, that's nuts.
That little triangle that they removed there. To the person that did that work and didn't kill themselves, I can't believe that it even happened. But they basically undermined the entire beam that supports a 35-foot tall wall of
Of brick.
It's like the amount of tons. I didn't do the math, but I can tell you what. When we took the brick wall, the block wall, that was just. It wasn't even the block wall. Wasn't even up underneath this beam. It was just kind of. It was part of an old stairwell. Again, something that we couldn't really see. We took the old block wall down, and then we looked at. And I'm like, I can't believe this. We had to, we put the 6x6 underneath there. I said, nobody even go underneath. So I stopped what I was doing. It was actually 2 days before I left on vacation. I said, I'm not leaving on vacation until this block wall is done and supporting this beam. So, this was something that we ran into, again, something I didn't really count on, but that block wall now goes all the way up and is, we used non-shrink grout and made sure it was solid up underneath the bottom of that beam, so it's never gonna fall down. you know, that's just a one little detail.
So
Had
Chris,
that been a loading dock or something?
No, the loading dock you're talking about is on the opposite
Opposite
side of the
side,
building,
okay.
yep, on Elm Street.
Yeah.
My intent is to keep that as a loading dock for the restaurant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yep.
So.
Is that gonna be
so-
just a storage area, or is there gonna be any living space in this building?
That's the back of the first level commercial space. It's gonna be out behind the new elevator. That will be a part of whatever commercial space. And, you know, these ideas progressively come to me as I'm like seeing things and opportunities. I didn't think that there would be an opportunity for potentially another restaurant, which I haven't talked to you about that. So the restaurant we're talking about with the original construction is on the corner of
Sure.
South and Elm. But this being right next to other exhaust fans right back there behind the Golden Monkey, that would be an opportunity for, say, maybe a tavern or something to come in there and have a little kitchen space in the back. So, you know, just kind of, you know, feeling out what kind of commercial space, you know, commercial
Can
rentals.
Fill it out, right?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a nice opportunity.
Chris, what will you do with these little recessed in the window or whatever? they are?
We've already ripped that out and we're replacing that with a brand new window. Yep.
So, just back to the financing. So
Judy, her job. Get back to our job. Right.
well, I walk downtown every day, so I walk by this. So I've seen a lot of this firsthand. As you know, I know Jeff has explained to you our process and that we have to do a public hearing if we're gonna move forward with this. And that's gonna take some time. There's gotta be public notification. You've explained that your bank financing is contingent upon an appraisal and possibly even this agreement. And so, but you've been doing work.
Correct? Mhm.
So explain to the board and to
Sure.
the public how you're moving forward with work at the same time. And is there going to be some delay or are you going to have to shorten this work period right now until these final decisions are made on the other part of your financing?
Yep.
So-
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, I wish I had an unlimited bank account, but unfortunately I do not. And so I am definitely running into the point where I need to start to slow down. You know, we get as far as we can here. You know, every bank financing requires 20% down. I've more than met my 20% down with just the restorations that we've done in the purchase alone. But, you know, without that financing, what we're gonna have to do is kind of slow down on what, you have to pick a floor, right? So, I mean, I can generate income from the apartments, I can generate income from, you know, the residential end of things, but, you know, as far as the commercial, it's gonna be more challenging to kind of, because another shortfall, which again, I know you want to talk more about financing, but, you know, it really kind of plays one-to-one. The first level of the decking is gonna require us to rip out every 2x12 on the entire first floor. So, and that's because of, yes, just the restorations that have happened in the past. I mean, I'm gonna have to tear every single one of those out. So I may have to slow down a little bit if we can't get, you know, this financing approved, because I need to start generating income from the property. So I'm gonna push the second and third level residential, and then maybe just kind of slow down on the commercial until I can get things lined up. So,
Yeah, and you're financing, and at this point, if the financing you have, and I know we had qualified that there was a sort of, you're looking at one source of financing essentially as a construction and mortgage loan.
yes.
Right? At this point then, since that's all contingent on this process, you're basically using all your own money to do all this?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I said, I wish I could.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
and
that's
some of that, I mean,
that's
what
his
we're talking
equity,
about-
and, you know, that's
And
his
this is-
equity. and,
right, and this is really getting
bank
the time with
purposes.
this issue, right? Because never mind the pilot, right, there's also, you know, we sometimes overlook the sales tax rebate you can get. So
Yeah.
everything
Right.
you're buying right now, you're paying tax on,
Full-
and we can help
yeah.
you do that. This is why we wanted to sort of push this, because we do have this 10-day window, you know, we have to have a public hearing. We may have to alter our standard meeting anyway. Carol, we can talk more about that later on, but I think that's up
For
to
May,
push a
so that
little
we don't
bit.
do two meetings.
Because I don't think we can actually, even if we approve this right
Well,
now,
let's do it
we
the same
can't
day.
get this public hearing by the time our regular meeting, which is like the 8th. So if it's gonna have to be the next week, I think.
So
we can-
the soonest we could have the public hearing is May 12th.
Right.
It's because of the publication timelines and the posts are not publishing
Every day.
Every day. So the soonest, if we get it over by tomorrow morning, that's the next deadline tomorrow morning is, then the 10-day requirement would bring us to May 12th.
Okay.
And our meeting
Which
is
is-
scheduled for May 8th, which is Thursday, so.
So
we could
12th
make
is
it-
Tuesday?
12th
get an
is a
email about
Monday.
Monday's a
What's
Monday.
that? Yeah, so we can make it the 15th, this is what I put as a
So we'll
proposed.
put out a request to board members to see if we can move the May meeting.
1 week, these Thursday the 15th, I think, would be the logical way
Okay.
to do it, so we're.
Well, how much will that screw you guys up?
I'm supposed to be in New York City.
Well, that has
The
to,
15th.
that has to change up. Okay? All right? I mean, it just goes without
All
saying.
right,
Yeah,
so we'll
right.
talk about that later.
Okay,
Let's
we can-
stick with the project right now. Sorry. I'll go through the schedule later.
Right, but the public hearing would have to be, the earliest would be the, you said the 12th?
The earliest
That's
is the
Monday,
12th.
the 12th, right?
Right.
What's your loan? We have to have that completed before you can even schedule your loan.
That's
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
We can have, if the board chooses, we can have the hearing and approval on the same day.
Yeah, if we're able to close in May, given, you know, how helpful this is to Chris.
It is what it
Right.
is, right?
Yeah, I've already talked to Mike Murray, I think Chris probably has too, at Adirondack Trust about that.
Yeah.
And he didn't, there were no alarms going off. He
Okay.
understands, and everybody understands how important this is,
Right.
including lenders, as we said.
Right, right. What, are you locked? Is your rate?
Yeah, so
You're
yes,
locked?
that's interesting.
Yeah,
So
yeah, not so much.
it's challenging, and actually, you know, being that I am self-financing this project and considering purchasing the other projects on Washington Street that was also approved as well.
Yep.
You know, I'm actually waiting for this loan to be completed before I even take on I don't want to collapse my entire business because I've, you know, taken on more than I can
Yep.
handle, so.
Yeah, and the letter
Yeah.
that, I mean, I know you don't have this, the letter's dated April 4th, it says the rates are held for 45
days.
days.
Okay.
So I'd like to talk to Mike about that, because I knew we
Slight
weren't gonna hit
extension.
that 45
Yeah.
days.
That's what I was
And,
worried about.
You know, no promises, right, no guarantees, but he was not
But that- yeah,
alarmed.
that gets you
Well,
to
if
about-
you are prepared to close within 45 days, then the onus is off of you. So
Yep.
that's, we'll
Right.
try to make sure you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we are, but yeah, just to that other thing I was saying, I have lost the rate for that other loan, because I do
Sure.
have a commitment on the purchase of the one Washington Street project, but, you know, this is kind of weighing that as well.
They all work together.
Yeah, they really do.
Let's
It might work
Can
in
you
your
do
favor.
Can you do
Yeah,
like
I don't know.
we
I don't think so.
pre-approve it earlier?
Never goes
pending
down.
the hearing on the 12th?
That won't help them. That won't help them.
No.
No, it's gotta be
But
full back.
what we can do, and I talked to Jeff about this briefly last night. I think what we should do is, we should take a look, well, I'd like to run our numbers to see what is the sales tax benefit, what's the mortgage tax benefit, so we can come up with some projected numbers for that before our public hearing. And I would also like to see, when I look at your budget, and I've got it here, you do report a fairly decent, I think, cash flow, starting even in year 5. And so I want to go back and look at our records and see what we've done in the past for other related projects for some comparison purposes. And so we will look at the potential of making it a 7-year pilot instead of 10.
Okay.
And or we will look at maybe even going beyond that.
Okay.
But we'll look closely at your cash flow and what are the benefits in terms of both the pilot, the sales tax, and the mortgage tax.
Chris, one question I have,
So we'll come up with those
do
numbers.
you have, what assumptions, or maybe I had them here and I didn't, are you making as far as the retail spaces in your income?
What assumptions I'm making?
Yeah, I mean, are you assuming that by what year are you fully,
I would say, I'm hoping by year 2 or so, 2 or 3. And we've talked to several people that have interest, but no
Yeah,
actual
okay.
commitments yet. It's, you know, it's
Right.
still tough you walk in there and the floors are still. You can
no,
see
no,
the-
I understand, I'm just
We have it
wondering.
as year 4 and then year 4.
Year 4 complete.
Okay, yeah, because
So
that's,
that's what, yeah.
Yeah,
That-
year
that-
4,
Fully rented?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
and
that
I-
also the Rite Aid?
No,
No,
there's
just,
no
that's
commercial-
just,
there's no commercial.
okay, thank you, yeah.
yeah, the commercial spaces is what I'm sort of concerned about.
Right.
Is that,
I,
Well, once the project on the other corner has come to fruition,
Sure,
you're in
help.
better shape.
Yeah.
Sure.
should help.
I mean, I looked at your income that you're projecting for the 20 apartments, and I even ran at a 5% loss in case you have some
Yeah,
people moving
vacancies.
vacancies,
Sure.
short-term vacancies. I mean, our experience has been these apartments will rent up right away.
Hopefully.
That you'll probably keep them rented up, and I don't know what your square footage is, but do you know what your square footage is for your ones?
Each one of them are, I think they're,
On average.
It was in there.
well, it's 15 by 38, so that would, you have to run that quick, but probably like 700s, just,
700s for
Yeah.
the ones?
yeah,
And then you just have 4 twos, right?
correct.
Okay.
Yep,
And they're slightly larger?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Yeah, your numbers were good on, I think, in terms of the income that you generate from that, and I do think that it gives you a pretty positive cash flow.
Mind you, we can only look at the.
Yeah.
No, I know that, I know that. I know that.
Just,
But
yeah.
when I'm looking at the budget, I know that that's where.
Yeah,
the
right,
majority
I
of the
understand
income
your
comes
concept, I do, yeah.
Let me ask you another question, Chris. What are the chances that you find any other surprises?
from. Unknowns?
Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you have any unknown unknowns?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I guess you can't know those. Any
Yeah.
known unknowns?
So to your question on the 2-bedroom apartment, we almost had to take one of those 2 bedrooms and make it into a 1-bedroom because as National Grid has, I can't believe this building right in the downtown district, we're not able to get a three-phase 800 amp service in there. They're not able to hit us overhead because the wire is too thick and too heavy.
We just redid that road with new,
Yeah, so, so 800 amp network service, they're saying that that portion on Elm Street is too unstable to support 800 amps. So they're only allowing me 800 amps. I need 1200. I actually, throughout the project, I actually went back to the engineer, the electrical engineer, and said, how do we get this from a 1200 amp service down to an 800 amp service? And that was to basically input a ton of gas and get rid of some of the electrical consumption that we had originally designed around. Now, going back and forth with grid over the last 3 months, I'm still on temporary power that's, that's suspended, kind of like where those wires are, over Hank's building, either way. They've come to the decision that they need to bring high voltage, 13,000 volts into the building, and we're going to be giving up a room that's approximately 19 by 15 to build them an electrical high voltage vault room. So that way we can have a
who else gets service off of that?
just my building only.
That's ridiculous.
Oh yeah, so that's a big money thing that I didn't come up with, or didn't originally plan for. Probably 200,000.
Where's the closest you could run a line from
So
without doing this? I don't mean to,
Yeah, no,
I'm not
so-
your project.
yeah, I've been
But that's
I've been down that
ridiculous.
road a ton of different ways. They could bring power poles, utility poles, overhead service down South Street, and so I've already met with city engineer, and they said absolutely not.
Right.
And
You
neither
put
the
the
county-
fucking power poles away.
Right,
I know,
but
right.
how's
Nobody
the
wants
mill,
that.
how's the mill pulling theirs?
They have it. They have high
From the
voltage
hot-
with transformers. So the big green boxes out in front of the
Yeah.
mill, they're high voltage transformers step down into the building. The
Right.
problem with my property is I don't have any property. The building is the
But,
property. So I
but could
can't-
you get an easement off of like behind Hank's or
We
behind?
talked about that and we've explored that option. There's, you guys, the city has a small piece of property there and
On
then.
School Street.
Yep, then
Yeah.
there's another piece of property between. And so if we put the transformer on your property, which, I think we would agree with that would be a good idea because this building is worthy of it. We then would have to go underground and get easements from the other neighboring properties, but it would be,
A service to them.
it's high voltage.
Right.
So, no. One other thing, because I've been down this road before. With,
Sorry,
with, so
I'm derailing your meeting, I'm sorry.
the parking garage that you guys paid, they paid big money to put the high voltage lines under the ground and get rid of those poles because the parking garage there for 20 Elm Street. So now in that little property
Yep.
that we talked about burying, there's high voltage lines. You can't bury another high voltage line next to another one. And round we go. So I've literally been with National Grid, with the city engineer, and how do we get to where we need to go? And again, that's why I started this conversation. I can't believe that a building right downtown, it can't get an 800 amp or even what I wanted was a 1200 amp service. It's been extremely challenging, and I've had to deal with engineers in Syracuse, and finally got engineers to come from Syracuse to meet with me, and we came up with a plan. And fortunately, I do have that loading dock area, which is kind of a little bit of a flex area. I had a little extra room there, and I was able to, with, you know, a complete redesign of that whole, you know, section of the building, shrink the kitchen down, shrink the dishwashing area down, and make myself a 3-hour fire rated with its own heating and cooling, with its own ventilation, with its own containment. And we're gonna bring a high voltage transformer in there with big industrial, you know, doors, sprinklers.
So you're doing that instead of giving up the 2-bedroom?
Correct, the 2-bedroom will go back.
Okay.
Yep, because we no
But
longer
none
need
of
it.
this was part of and parcel of your plan?
Absolutely
None
not.
of it?
So it's
Absolutely not.
$200,000.
I'm hoping that we get out for under 200,000. And so they were actually a little bit, you know, they were like, you know, felt bad for me because on the 274 Glen Street building that I own, we had, it to me, you know, as a developer, I see that same, you know, condition like you just suggested. We redid that street. We have power underneath. So I said, okay, in our project budget, we're gonna just have a, you know, an 800 amp service connected to the network, just like we did at 274, 276 Glen Street. We had all of our electric meters in there, and it was a quick, easy connection. And it was a free connection because, you know, you're turning the meters. National Grid wants to do that. So I do all the renovations, put them in there, they connect. This one is absolutely not that. They said that the 800 or the 800 amp would be 800 amp is not stable enough on Elm Street to provide me the service that they did for 276 Glen. I can't argue with engineers, and they've done studies, and they have a recent study that they hung their hat on.
South
so.
Street wasn't stable enough either?
I
You
don't,
can't get to from the front.
I don't know why South Street wasn't an option. They don't have high enough voltage, I guess, on South Street to provide the 1200 amp service. I don't know.
I'm sorry.
I
I'm sorry for putting you through this. I apologize.
No, it's okay. But it's just been like, I'm like, how do we not? We should be on permanent power. We should be on permanent
course we should.
disconnects by this far into the project. You know, and I'm like, you know, I can't believe that I can't get the power that I need for, you know, without building this whole room. So it's been challenging.
But we don't have any operating expenses.
Absolutely not. Nor do we have ripping out the entire first floor and rebuilding the entire first floor. So that's, you know.
Yeah.
And then, you know, just one other picture is the back roof system too. I mean, this back roof, I did not plan on ripping out the whole thing, but you know, that's the start to it, yeah.
Well, I hate to say it, but this is getting back to my original question, that you may not be done with the surprises.
No, we just got
Sure.
that electrical
Probably
surprise,
not.
you know, 2 weeks ago, so. What am I to do? Other than conform to the power gods,
Right.
yeah, so that's what we do, and so, yeah.
Okay.
That's why we're
Any
here.
other board members
Hopefully.
with questions for Chris? Okay. So the draft resolution here, is this it? Yes.
Yep.
So Kara has produced a resolution for us that basically says that we accept the application. That we will move forward and hold a public hearing on this. During that period of time, it gives us and our team here at the city to do that continued analysis of what the potential benefits are at various different levels, including sales tax, mortgage tax, and a potential pilot. And we'll get that done before the hearing. And I think what we'll do is we'll have a board meeting at the same time that we do that public hearing. We'll try to move that date so they correspond. So we'll take care of that this afternoon. We'll ask Jeff to get an email out to the board members and try to reschedule that date. And then we'll get the public hearing scheduled so we're all in the same timeline. We'll check the mayor's schedule too.
Yeah, in the interest of expediting, we'll try and do it that week. I think we just have
Right.
to hatch out what.
And we'll try to put you up first so that you don't have to hang through our entire.
Throw in 5 meetings.
Yeah.
But we
right.
need to do it today, so I
Yeah.
can get the notice
Yes.
by 10 a.m. tomorrow to the.
So we have everybody but Tim and Billy.
Yeah.
So we have a quorum. We can move
Yeah, we
it to
can-
the 15th.
Yeah. Well, the
And you'll
question is,
have
can
to
we do the
work that out.
15th? Judy, you said you're supposed to be in
I'm
Europe.
supposed to be in New York
someplace.
City.
Just New York, just New York.
Well, you're in New York.
Just
That's
New
what you do. Already solved that problem.
Do you,
Okay.
Yeah, you might not have to do much, Ed.
All right, I'll go back to that and see if I can get out of
I
that.
appreciate you guys expediting things.
Absolutely.
You know, I've never asked for a pilot program in the past, and, you know, and it's
It's
a,
available, you should think about them.
I know.
But a lot of your stuff isn't commercial.
Yeah.
We can only deal with commercial.
Right,
Yeah.
but I mean, no, I was sort of surprised when we first met that you had, because I think the first time we actually sat down and talked wasn't the South Ball at the time, it was Craft on 9.
Yeah.
And I was surprised you hadn't asked for one there. You know, I mean, one of the issues that I want to, I'm trying to sort of highlight, and it's a public meeting, so it's great to know, is that, you know, there's a lot of consternation and there's a lot of discussion these days about, you know, all the historic buildings in Glens Falls and maintaining the historic quality and the nature of these buildings. Everybody thinks it's a great idea if you can make it happen. But, you know, a lot of these buildings, and this is a perfect example, and the buildings across the street are great examples from this one. They require extra money, a lot of
You
extra
bet.
money.
That's right.
And now sometimes you can get historic tax credits that can underwrite these things. Sometimes, like in the case of the DRI, we can find grants that are specifically earmarked to sort of pour into these buildings. In other cases, right, you know, someone has to pay for this. Now, everybody wants them to happen, but if they're gonna happen, frequently we have to say, listen, how can we as a community collectively help this project to be restored as opposed to torn down?
Yep.
And in this case, what the idea can do, right, is the community is sort of investing in, right, some tax benefits to allow this building to be restored rather than torn down, turn into some new building. And when you look at the amount of work that you're doing and are gonna have to do, it's just, I mean, I think it's a way of sort of understanding the tasks before us as a community as we, you know, try and restore these historic buildings.
I do want you to be aware of the fact that the school district does not benefit from our granting a pilot. So there is sometimes some pushback
Sure.
from people with other financial interests. Just
Be aware.
be aware. But they exist for development purposes that eventually
Right.
Will kick in.
the school district will benefit from.
Big
So just,
picture, yeah.
You know, just be aware.
Yep, understood.
Okay. So
Yeah,
I'm
that's
gonna,
why I asked. I've
gonna,
never done one before for that
Yeah.
reason, you know?
anybody else with anything? Okay,
No,
there
we're
being
good.
nothing, then I'm gonna make the resolution accepting the application for financial assistance submitted by Patent Property Management LLC, the company, related to a project at 4656 South Street, Glens Falls, New York, and authorizing us to hold a public hearing with respect to the project, inviting the public to come and speak, as well as the board members, and describe the financial assistance that is being contemplated by the agency with respect to the project, and we'll be ready to do that part of it by that time. And tentatively, the meeting will be held on May 15th at 8 a.m., and we'll confirm that by close of business today. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays, any abstentions?
Yeah.
No vote yet.
Right, right.
There being none, the motion is passed, and any other business? There being none, is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Adjourned.
Thank you.
Can,